name's Bobby Coyle. I'm an alcoholic. Through the grace of God, the 12 steps and sponsorship, I've been sober since June 2nd of 1988. For that, I'm grateful. I have a home group. It's the Franklintown group of Alcoholics Anonymous. We meet at 2044 Fairmount Avenue, right across the street from the Eastern State Penitentiary in Philadelphia. On Wednesday nights at 6:30, we have a speaker meeting. Saturday afternoon at 5:30, we have a big book meeting. And Sunday morning at 9:30, we have a step meeting, with the last Sunday of the month being a tradition meeting. Once this crisis is over, and if you're ever in the neighborhood, please stop by. We'd love to have you. I'd like to thank Joe for inviting me to participate. I need to tell you, and some of my friends were online, they'll let you know, I'm not the most tech-savvy individual there is. But I remember being at Narassa, I guess almost 20 years ago, when there were spirited discussion on online meetings and whether they were really AA or not. And I'm also not proud to say that I've never been the most open-minded individual. So I had a particular position, and I'm glad my position was in the minority. And so when this crisis started, about a month ago, my wife, she said, listen, you want to go to one of those Zoom meetings? I said, nah. I scoffed. Here I am, 31 years sober, still not the most open-minded guy. And I said, nah, I'm not. I don't know. Well, I did my home group, and I've been doing my home group ever since. And I am so grateful that those who are the skills who set up these Zoom meetings, I think it's fantastic. And I'm a firm believer. I think that Bill and Bob are looking down on us and just shaking their heads in amazement. I think this is great. You know, before the meeting started, the guys who were announcing from throughout the world, and I think that's fantastic too, So my story is, well, actually, hold on. I'm not supposed to tell my story. Sorry about that. I'm supposed to share the 10th step. Okay. So the 10th step says, continue to take personal inventory, and we wrong, promptly admitted it. Now, you can't continue to take an action if you never took the inaction initially. For instance, you can't continue to get loaded and arrested and cause havoc if you never got loaded, arrested, or caused havoc before. So the same thing, for me, 10 is so simple. It's 4 through 9 on a regular basis. So with that, if you allow me, I will share my experiences on those previous steps, which leads up to the 10th step. Now, you may find this hard to believe. I really don't think I did the first step until I was sober 2 years. And you say, well, how the hell did that happen? I have no idea. I don't know why I didn't pick a drink up in my first couple of years of sobriety. It was through no volition of my own. I didn't get involved in the steps through any, I didn't decide to wake up one day and decide I'd be a decent human being. I got involved in the steps through pain and desperation. And I actually got introduced to AA. I spent 6 months at the VA hospital. And I actually thought I had outside issues, other substances, stress disorder, but not alcohol, because I was a beer drinker. But the best piece of advice I got when I got discharged from the VA hospital was go to AA meetings, and I went to AA meetings. I went to AA meetings religiously. In the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, I was a liar, thief, and a cheat. I was a creep. I was worse than I was when I was drinking, because when I was drinking, at least I had alcohol. I mean, here I was stone cold sober and exhibiting some pretty awful behavior. And I didn't believe I was an alcoholic. I really thought if it was my short use of other substances, if I left that alone, I'd be okay. But, they say fake it till you make it, and that's what I did. But it was a very turbulent time. And 1 month after my second anniversary, I went to stick a gun in my mouth. The same pathetic feeling I had 25 months before, but 25 months before, I'm loaded with drugs and alcohol. Here I am, stone cold sober, in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, making regular attendance in meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous. And here I was dying from untreated alcoholism. I mean, I want to stick a gun in my mouth. So that should tell you that my life was unmanageable, the first step. So I'm at a meeting one night, and there's this guy from my neighborhood. His nickname was Troubles. That's a hard-earned nickname. And Troubles was in and out of jail. I know him. He was a little bit older than me. But he was one of the guys I saw at my first outside meeting, and I was surprised to see him. I thought he was dead or incarcerated. But here he was, sober a few years in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I go up to him after this meeting, and really, the thoughts at the end of my life are strong. And I go up to him at the end of the meeting. I said, Bobby, because he didn't like to be called Troubles. I said, I need some help. Would you be my sponsor? Well, that's a good point. I need to let you know. So to let you know that 2 years of being a creep in AA, I didn't have a sponsor. I don't know if that surprises any of you, but I didn't even have a sponsor. So I went up to him afterwards. I said, Bobby, I need a sponsor. Would you be my sponsor? And he looked at me. He said, Bobby, I've been watching you these past couple of years, and I'm sticking my chest out like he likes me, right? He says, I need to tell you, you're full of shit. Now, that's not the response I'm looking for, you know? And before I could say anything, he says, I'm going to be your sponsor under certain conditions. You're going to call me every single day. You're going to go to a big book meeting a week. You're going to go to a step meeting a week. You're going to go to a men's meeting. You're going to get yourself a coffee commitment, and you're going to leave them damn women alone. And I'm talking to myself, who's he talking to? I'm sober 25 months. I'm selling the grapevines. I got it going on. But what I did, I said, okay, you know, and he took me back to his house that night. He used some very colorful language. See, I grew up in a very gritty blue-collar neighborhood, but it was getting gentrified. You know how the yuppies come in, ruin everything. Like they take abandoned warehouses and make them into loft condos and things like that. So the meetings in the neighborhood were like with the yuppies, you know, and I'm running circles around them. But and he knew that. So he used some very colorful language. He told me I didn't know anything, that I should just shut up and listen. And he introduced me to the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. 25 months sober. And I hear guys, the steps weren't popular when I got sober. People weren't talking about the big book. That's not true. That's not my experience. It was popular. I just wasn't hanging out with guys like that. I didn't want nothing to do with them. People doing the right thing scared the hell out of me. I avoided them like the plague. So I went back to his house that night, and we went over the first 2 steps. And then he went to get on our knees and say the 3rd step prayer. So, whoa. And, but I did. And I need to tell you, as I was scared of this guy, there's no doubt about it, because he was someone just not to be tangled with. And I knew he was a tough guy, but there was a part of me that knew that I was also safe with this guy. It just wasn't in the rooms of AA. It was in the neighborhood where I would see him, you know, and I'm sure every group has an old timer like this. You know, they got the sparkle in their eye. They got the glow. You can't fake it. You can fake the talk, because that's what I was doing for 2 years. I'm talking the talk, but I'm certainly not walking the walk. And so I saw him outside the rooms of AA, where I knew that he was walking the walk. So we got on our knees and we said the 3rd step prayer. And when we got done, he said, Bobby, the way we do a 3rd step, we pick paper and pen up and do a 4th step. I said, whoa, easy does it. Let's keep this simple. How about I just go to a meeting and I just don't drink? You know, and I understand the slogans. They serve a purpose. But I'm using the slogans as a purpose not to do any work. So like the 3rd step, like when I got on my knees and said the 3rd step prayer, I'd be one of these guys in the meeting. Oh, I turned it over. I took it back, turned it over, took it back. That should be code that I didn't do any work at all, because I didn't do any work. So, but I don't want to do one of these 4 steps. I'm going to meetings. I hear people, doing my inventory, stirring stuff up. I feel like going out. I want to stick a gun in my mouth. 25 months sober. You can't get no further out than that. So I reluctantly relented, and I start working my inventory. Now, if there's anyone new here, and I want to be honest with you, I don't want to give you the impression that I knocked this out over a weekend, because I didn't. It probably took me about 3 or 4 months to finish my 4th step. Not for any other reason, except that I tend to be a lazy guy. When the heat is on my back, I'm motivated to do some work. But things were cool, I'm cool. No need to do any work. But I had to, the 4 steps not the answer to everything. If it were, it'd be a 4-step program. It's a 12-step program. And the purpose of the 4-step, my sponsor told me, was to get rid of the bigger garbage so I can move on and address the other issues. So it was only 3 areas. It was my fears, my resentments, and my sex conduct. That was it, And as simple as it is, it was difficult because I never had the courage to do the right thing. I hid behind the bottle. I hid behind my job. I never had the courage to do the right thing. So, but I wrote, and I wasn't going to write stuff down because God forbid someone were to find it, and again, fear just ran my life. So when I got done my fourth step, I'm probably about 32, 33 months sober at this point. It's time to do the fifth step. So I call my sponsor up. I say, Bobby, I'm going to go to retreat this weekend. I'm going to do this fifth step with a priest. He said, fantastic. When you get done, you can stop by my house so you can do it with me when you're done. And then, sometimes you're on your phone with your sponsor and you feel like saying, are you deaf? Did you hear what I said? Now, the reason I want to do my fifth step with a priest, it was not to be spiritually enlightened. I just knew as my indoctrination as a kid, I could tell him certain things that would just remain between me, him, and the lamppost. Nobody else would know. See, there were things about my inventory that I was embarrassed about. And there was no way that I could tell my sponsor for the fear that he would pass judgment, he would ridicule me, or even worse, he would betray the confidence and tell other people what I was about to disclose to him, which tells you that my fear list wasn't quite done. I never did that fifth step with a priest. I did it with my sponsor. And they turned out to be all unfounded fears. He did none of those things. He didn't pass judgment. He didn't ridicule me. To the best of my knowledge, he didn't tell anybody else what I disclosed to him. In fact, what he did was that he shared some of his experience with me, which took away the terminal uniqueness, which I thought I was the only person to have certain experiences. And I'll be forever grateful for him doing that. So when we got done, I was about to leave. He said, where are you going? I said, I got to go home. He says, no. You got to sit quietly there. You got to sit quietly for an hour. Sit quietly for an hour. I can't even sit quietly for 5 minutes. My head's always racing. I'm the type of guy, if I'm in a meeting, let's say it's a big book meeting and there's 20 of us and I'm looking around the room, there's 5 readers before me. I'll skip down to the 6th paragraph to make sure there's all the words. I know how to pronounce them. I mean, I'm just so nuts out of my head. And I miss what the other people are sharing. Or the only time I shared was to take a shot at somebody because, like I said, spiritual people scared the hell out of me. I was in rooms that were serene and I was uncomfortable, but if I shared my insanity, I set the room off and dodged the bullet. Things are cool. You know the old saying, you can't miss what you never had. I never had a peace of mind, so I never missed a damn thing. I loved insanity. So I sat quietly for that 1 hour. And it actually was a little bit longer because he knocked on his door. And I didn't nod off. Now, I say at this point, I'm sober about 32, 33 months. And the only way I can describe the experience I had after sitting quietly for that hour was that the screaming inside stopped. Now, I know that may not sound like a lot to you, but for me, it was a tremendous relief because my head is always racing. And I can actually just sit there quietly. See, I knew about prayer as a kid. I was like kind of, I don't want to say beat into me because that's disrespectful to the church, but whatever. I just grew up in a very strong church that was very indoctrinating, but I had no experience in meditation whatsoever, none. So this would be my first experience, and it was just tremendous. When we got done the hour, we didn't burn my 4th step when we did the 5th step because my sponsors told me I would need these for the rest of the steps. 6 and 7, character defects. I didn't know what these were. If you caught me sharing in the meeting, I would share something clever because I was the advantage of getting sober young. You don't fry all the cells, so I was able to hold on to information, give it back to you, and I'm sure I sounded like I knew what the hell was going on. But the truth was, I didn't know anything about character. I had no character. That's what happened when I did my inventory. People say I had a spiritual experience. I don't know. I had a root experience. I had things in black and white. I found out how much of a creep I was, I found out I had no character whatsoever. I thought I was the greatest, the coolest uncle. All my siblings were all married. I had kids. I was single, never married, no kids. So I would hook them up at the holiday times. Everyone liked the cool uncle. I thought I was the greatest cop in the city. I thought I was this. I thought I was that. And the truth was I engaged in behavior that brought dishonor among my coworkers. And I justified it by the type of work that I did. The truth was I served with men and women who served with integrity. And they didn't do drugs. They didn't drink on the job. They didn't do things that I did, So I had a rude awakening. All this stuff was black and white. And over the years, I would say, 6 was just willing and 7 step was a prayer. And my sponsor said, Bobby, you need to put legs on those prayers. Like character defects, let's say one of them, I'm not the most patient person, and I can pray all day long, God, help me be patient, help me be patient. But during the course of my day, should I have an opportunity to exhibit patience and I choose not to, then that prayer went right out the window. God will do for me what I can't do for myself, but this is a program of action. So if someone crossed my path that day and they try my patience and I lash out in sarcasm, and sarcasm's, it's nothing but anger, it's also referred to as language of the Irish. So I would take a shot at somebody, but I'd like to share another experience on patience. So me and my friend Billy's on the online. We did a lot of young people, Scott. So we're young. We did young peoples all over. And one of our favorite conferences was Glurkipa, the Great Lake Region Conference of Young People in AA. And Glurkipa was being held in Indianapolis. This is 20-some years ago, right? I'm supposed to be the Sunday morning spiritual speaker. Now, it shows you how screwed up that committee was. Obviously, they didn't screen people. So I'm the Sunday morning speaker. So me and Billy, we fly from Philly to Newark, and then from Newark to Indianapolis. So we get up to Newark, and we catch up with a friend of ours, Steve C. from DC. You can't make this stuff up, right? So we're walking through Newark Airport, and the first time I ever saw this, they had a meditation room, a quiet room, not a chapel, no denomination, but a meditation room. And Billy said, hey, check that out. I said, yeah. He said, you want to stop? I said, nah, let's get something to eat. We're hungry, right? So we go to the place, I forget what it was, but we ordered sandwiches, and it was these guys are taking long, right? I said, oh, now this is all prior 9/11. This is when you can act up in an airport without getting in trouble. But it was just taking forever. So I told Billy, I said, go ahead, go to the gate. I'll grab your sandwich. I'll meet you at the gate. He said, okay. And so now the impatience is coming out on me, the sarcasm, the anger, right? So I finally said something to the guy. I said, listen, my plane's about to go. I needed my sandwich. Come on, you got to step up. But I said it just the way I just said it now, but I'm sure I said it with much more sarcasm and anger. So he said, well, I'm doing the best I can. So he got flippant because I pushed his buttons, right? So I said, screw it. I said, I want my money. I got to go. He says, well, I'll meet you. You got to go down to the end of the counter. So I go to the end of the counter. This is a true story, I swear to God. I go down to the end of the counter. He shows up. He says, can I help you, sir? Like we just had this conversation 30 seconds ago. I said, yeah. I said, I need my money. I got to go. It's taking too long. There's 2 registers there. He said, which register did you order from? I said, that one right there. He said, I'm sorry. She's on break, and you'll have to wait till she comes back. And through gritted teeth, now mind you, I'm on my way to be a spiritual speaker, right? Through gritted teeth, I said, I can't wait for her to come back. If I could wait for my sandwich, my plane's leaving, I got to go. Give me my money. He said, I'm sorry, sir. I can't help you. Oh, you can't help me. Look over. True story. I reached over. I grabbed the keys out of the cash register, and I start running through the airport. Now, again, this is prior 9/11 where you could do stupid stuff, right? So I'm running through the airport. A passerby says, yo, there's this guy. He's behind you. Short, fat guy running behind me. God forbid if he falls and have a heart attack. Now I'm in trouble, even more trouble, right? So, but I got the keys in my hand. Like, what do you do? So I throw them in the trash can. I get to the gate. Everyone had boarded. The gate area is empty. The door's just about open. So I push my way. I get on the plane, on the runway. I get on the plane. I sit next to Billy. Now, Steve is there, too. This is the first time I've seen Steve. So Billy's there. He says, Bobby, where's my sandwich? I turn around and said, you know what, Billy? F you and F that sandwich, right? Now, Steve's never heard me curse. He's like, wow, what's with him? And I'm peeking. I'm looking to make sure the cops aren't coming on the plane. The plane takes off. We're in midair. And I turn to Billy and I said, you know what? I'm going to write a letter to them. I can't believe I'm going on and on. And I tell them the story. He said, well, Bobby, in what part of that letter are you going to tell them that you stole the keys out of the cash register? So character defects, flaming up, multiple years of sobriety, so it's just nuts. So I know that was a long story, But the reason I want to get to that, I've gotten away from saying that six is just willing and 7-step is a prayer. It's a lot more than that. And I really worked on different things through, as my sobriety, I've grown through sobriety. And to be honest, I needed professional help in some areas. One of my behaviors with women, again, double digits of sobriety. And I always hid behind the fact that, well, you know what, it was always consenting adults. And even though that was the case, my behavior with women was still very creepy, double digits of sobriety. And I needed to, and the steps helped me tremendously. But like Bill says, sometimes we need additional help. And I needed to go to additional help to take a look at my behavior, you know. Is it any wonder that I mean, God forbid, I was, you know, I'm in my 40s and sober 20 plus years, and people, man, you're not married? Like, what's your deal? And I would date girls long distance. You know, I would meet them at a conference and date them long distance. You know why? Because there was safety in the distance, because I wasn't mature enough. I wasn't ready for the commitment, the intimacy. You know, it was just crazy stuff. So 6 and 7 is a lot more than just willingness. It's a prayer. Those character defects can pop up, and they do pop up. You know, I tell people, I'm not the poster boy of AA. Come live with me for a week. See what type of the guy that I am. You know, but I like to think I'm not the guy that, well, I know this. I know I'm not the guy that I was 31 years ago. I like to think I'm not the guy that I was 2 years ago. And if I am, shame on me. You know, making mistakes doesn't get me loaded. It's justifying those mistakes or defending those mistakes. That's what will lead to the arrogance, which will lead to the drink. I'm not drunk proof. I know that I have a daily reprieve contingent on my spiritual maintenance. And I can't be running around engaging all that type of behavior and still claiming to be sober. You know, sober is just being in abstinence of alcohol. I mean, I've been abstinent from alcohol for almost 32 years. But those other behaviors, I just need to stay on top of. The 8th step made a list. Well, because I didn't burn my 4th step, when I did my 5th step, my 8th step, most of my 8th step was done. But I had to add more names. Now, I used to be one of these guys at 8th and 9th step meetings. I never harmed anybody but myself. That should have been a tip-off. I never did my inventory. Because once I did my inventory, unfortunately, in my experience, I found out everyone I came in contact with, I harmed. And unfortunately, those closest to me the most were harmed the most, you know. And the 8 steps, I had to write the rest of the names. And again, I had to become willing. And if I didn't have the willingness, I had to pray for the willingness. See, my sponsor tells me if I ever get stuck on a particular step, you fall back on the previous step. And as we go through the steps, it's not asking us to take any action that we haven't taken already. So on the 6th step, I have willing. So that's what the 8th step is. You write a list and you become willing. The 9th step, direct amends. You know, no phone calls or no letters from me, because it would say indirect amends. It said make direct amends. And Charlie did a beautiful job on 8 and 9 last night. And I like to share my experience on the 9th step. So I'm at a meeting in Philly, North Philadelphia, the Day by Day group up at 11th and Rockland, pretty rough neighborhood. And I was there, this is 25 years ago. And so there's a guy who walks down the steps. I recognize this guy right away. I have not seen this guy since probably the early 80s, late 70s, early 80s. I used to drink with him. And one day we were in a bar and we had an exchange and he backed down. So from that point on, when I ever wanted to impress anybody how tough or nuts I was, I would publicly humiliate this guy. Now, I'm not a tough guy. I never was. But it was the verbal taunts and he backed down. And then one day I slapped him with an open hand. He didn't do anything. And then one day I spat upon him. The utter degradation of spitting on another human being. It doesn't get any worse than that. You know? So he walked down the steps. I recognized him right away. Now he didn't recognize me, you know, sober up, clean up, you know? And so this is a meeting, like I said, in North Philadelphia. At this point, I'm living in South Philadelphia. So, and in Philly's a very parochial city, you know, so you don't go out of your neighborhood. So, but he walks down and he sits in the 3rd row and I look at him and he still doesn't recognize me. So I get introduced to speak. I looked him dead in the eye but I used my full name. I said, my name is Bobby Coyle and I'm an alcoholic. Then he nodded. And if you allow me, I just want to take a quick moment here and tell you why I use my full name. I know this is not 11 tradition. So, but you know what? And all of a sudden, when we get sober, it's like we join the mafia. We all get a nickname. There's Frank the Fox and Bucktooth Mary and Red Sweater Jerry and Pepsi George and Jimmy the Coat, Charlie Guitar. You get all these nicknames. Everybody in my neighborhood knows I was stark, raving, lunatic drunk. There's those little telltale signs. They come outside, they catch me, I'm urinating on their car. My girlfriend that's throwing the clothes out the window. God forbid I show up to AA and I don't want to, I don't want to give my last name. The 11 tradition is real clear. At the level of press, radio, and films, we maintain personal anonymity. That means I don't go on television. You won't hear me on the radio, or you don't see me in the paper with my full name, which is Robert Ignatius Benedict Coyle III, followed by the statement, is a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. That would be a violation of the 11th tradition. One of my favorite books, besides the big book, is that Dr. Bob and the Good Old Timers. What a great book. And Dr. Bob had such a dry sense of humor. But even in his book, Dr. Bob, when he talks about anonymity, he goes on and says that when one drunk is anonymous from another drunk, that's a violation of the tradition. He went on to say that anonymity is spiritually inspired and secrecy is fear-inspired. So I use my full name in Alcoholics Anonymous because you're not going to find Bobby C in the phone book, So off that soapbox, back to the meeting, I looked this guy dead in the eye and said, my name is Bobby Coyle, I'm an alcoholic. He nodded, So I was always told about making amends is much more than saying that I'm sorry. Because for me, I'm sorry, 2 words that don't mean squat. But making amends, financial amends are somewhat easy. You go in your pocket and you pay people back, or if it's a larger sum of money and you don't have it, you go on a payment plan with them. But what about the other damage? What about the psychological damage or the emotional damage? How do I make amends for that? I was told that I sit down and have conversations with people. You look them dead in the eye and you tell them what you did. And in my experience, very rarely were people surprised. But I told them what I did. But from more importantly, after that behavior, you do not exhibit it again. I was sober 5 years. I was 5 years sober, and I sat down with my father, and I had a very heartfelt conversation with him. And from that point on, I didn't engage in the behavior that embarrassed my father. In fact, my father and I became very good friends. In fact, when he died suddenly a couple years ago, I was the executor of his estate. I wasn't even welcome to family functions towards the end of my drinking. And out of the 8 siblings, my father selected me to be the executor of the estate. It's just amazing, the growth, So I figured if I embarrass this guy or I psychologically damaged him, how do I make amends to him? So I figured I publicly apologize to him. Not the grandstand. It's about righting the wrong. So I turned to the guy. His name was Bob. And I said, Bob, and I told the group what I did. And I turned to him. I said, Bob, I'm truly sorry the way I treated you. And as long as I stay sober, I hope I never treat another human being in the way I treated you. You know what? He got up out of his chair and he came up and he hugged me. It was an incredible experience. It really was. So now we're talking. I said, Bob, I ain't seen you in years. How you doing? He said, I'm sober 3 years in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I'm sober like 4 or 5. I said, really? I said, I'm surprised I never saw you because everybody in Philadelphia knows me. I'm not saying that they like me. I'm just saying that they know me. I'm a Bob. I do the deal, right? And so the arrogance creeps back. Oh, you never saw me before. And I said, well, what brings you here? Now, I live in South Philadelphia. He lives in what they call, it's Roxborough, which is like Northwest Philadelphia. And this meeting is in North Philadelphia. I said, Bobby, what brought you to this meeting tonight? He said, I need to tell you, Bob. He said, I was just looking for a different meeting. I was flipping through the meeting directory, and for some reason, this meeting just jumped out at me. Now, we have 1,700 meetings a week. Our meeting directory is 50, 60 pages. And I am a firm believer, as that guy flipped through that meeting directory and his finger landed on that meeting, I believe it was God, divinely inspired. So I knew that I had to take advantage of that opportunity because that key word in the 9 steps says wherever possible. I used to thought that said whenever possible. And for me, it's never the right time because I'm too busy, easy doesn't it? Wherever is place, whenever it's time. And I've had people come up to me before. See, when you have 8 siblings in a 10.5-year span, there's a very close resemblance. And people will come up to me, hey, you SOB, I remember you. Oh, no, you're confused. You talk about my brother Brian, my brother Sean. That wasn't me. And I had to make amends to my brothers, you know. So that's one experience. The next experience on the 9th step for me. So my home group for a while was the Stepping Stones group, and that was up in Northeast Philly. And I was one day we'd have our business meeting on Sunday mornings. And one day I was at the business meeting. I raised my hand. I made a motion. Forget what it was, but it had to be, I'm sure it had something, AA would have definitely benefited from that motion, I'm sure. And the strange thing happened. I've never seen this happen. My motion does not get seconded. Now that's unbelievable. I mean, I've seen some crazy nonsense get seconded for no other reason. Just feel sorry. That guy looks like an idiot, but I don't want to make it that bad. I'll second his motion. Well, there was a guy in the room, Freddie Wheels. Freddie Wheels and I are boys. So, I mean, I'm shooting daggers at him. I mean, like I'm actually going into a fit trying to get for him to see me, to get his hand up. And he doesn't second my motion. I can't believe it. My motion goes down in flames. No discussion. It was never seconded and no discussion. And I feel like an idiot. I would never talk to Freddie again. I would walk into the room afterwards. There'd be 4 or 5 guys there. They all be, hey, Bob, yeah, how you doing? Freddie, I would look right through him. I would even give him the stare. Just how nuts I was, right? So one day I was at work and my coworker came up to me. He said, Bobby, he said, Freddie Wheels, he was here. He wanted to take care of some sort of business. And I peeked out the window. I saw him. I said, tell him to take his fat ass downtown. He has to go downtown. He can't take care of that here. A couple weeks later, that same coworker called me up. He said, Bobby, he said, Freddie Wheels died last night. And he said, the reason I'm calling you is because he always spoke so highly of you. As God is my judge, I cannot tell you what that motion was about. That's how petty it was. Here was a guy that he was put in my path countless times. I had ample opportunity to make amends to him. But I chose not to, because it's tough being a spiritual giant, and I figured I'd make amends to him in my time. It was, and the moment that my coworker told me, he said, Bobby, because he always spoke so highly of you, I felt about yay big. And I've been praying for Freddie ever since. And the way Freddie died, Freddie was killed on State Road. He was on his motorcycle. He was taking the commitment up into Holmesburg Prison, which has since closed. But he was taking a prison commitment. He was carrying the message of Alcoholics Anonymous, and he was struck by a car on his bike and was killed instantly. So that's 2 experiences on the 9th step. One where I had an opportunity, I made amends, and I reaped the rewards. The other, I had ample opportunity, and I didn't take advantage of it, and I paid the price. Again, that key word, direct amends, wherever possible. The 10th step. So here we are. This is what I'm supposed to 35 minutes into the meeting. Now we're on to the 10th step. The 10th step, continue to take inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admit it. So that's why I just shared my experiences on 4 through 9, because you can't continue to take an action that you never took before. So I've done 4 through 9. I do 10. I'm pretty good. 6 times a week, 5 times a week, twice a week. And I used to say, if I'm not doing this 10 step, no one knows but me. That's not true either. Because when I'm not practicing these principles, I operate in nitwit mode. And should you cross my path when I operate in nitwit mode, you too are affected. As I told you, that experience at the airport. That gentleman, he was a hardworking guy at the airport. He was a very nice man. I'm the one who acted like an idiot. So, hi, Rosie. I acted like an idiot, and I got him to act like an idiot because of my behavior. So my behavior does impact other people. So, but I do try to stay on top of it. And, the funny thing now is I think one of the greatest gifts in AA is you learn how to laugh. And I laugh at myself a lot. And unfortunately, I give myself a lot of material to laugh at. So, but the deal is when I do something stupid in AA, I don't have to wait to the end of the day. The 10th step doesn't say, Bobby, when you go home, I mean, if I wronged you at 10 o'clock in the morning and you cross my path, and like if you're my coworker, why do I need to carry that crap with me for all day long, go to bed, and then at nighttime, doing the 10th step, oh, I harmed Billy today. I probably should make amends to him tomorrow. It says promptly admitted it. So I don't need to wait to the end of the day. It's like if I'm walking down the street and I get a stone in my shoe and it's 11 o'clock in the morning. I said, man, I can't wait to go home and get changed after work today so I could take the shoe off because this stone's a pain in it. It just, the stone's driving me nuts. You take the moment and you take the shoe off and get rid of the stone. That's what I like in the 10th step. I want to go back to 9 for a moment, and it ties into 10 as well. When it says, obviously, make direct amends, I do not get my peace of mind at the expense of someone else. And for a while, I was using the escape clause. Well, I can't make the amends because it would harm me. I'm not others. I don't make an amends to myself. That's what, the first 1 through 7 are. 8, 9, I don't make amends to myself. And I'm not others when those who would injure them or others. I'm not in the other category. The thing I love what the step book talks about, it says, when it talks about the 9th step, talks about judgment, sense of timing. These are usually characteristics that we don't have, unless we're working with a sponsor. So, but I don't get my peace of mind at the expense of somebody else. And I can tell you there was only 2 cases, which is amazing the way I live. There were only 2 cases in which I did not have to, I could not make the direct amends because it would definitely injure someone else. However, I am willingness to make amends if the situation were to arise. And that's the spirit of the step. Because these steps are spiritual principles. It's not like the AA police exist and someone knocks on your door, says, I'm sorry, but you violated you didn't do the 9th step correctly, and we're here to take you away, And I'm glad the AA police don't exist, because if it did, I would want to be the commissioner. So, but the 10th step, so I'm pretty good at it, and so it doesn't need to wait to the end of the day. And to go back to what I said earlier, listen, I make mistakes. This is where the 10th step allows me to clear the wreckage of my past. And the nice thing about it is if I stay on top of this, it doesn't really need to require that much work. Now, I know there is different schools of thought. Some people, like they do inventories, they write a 4-step, multiple, and I don't want to get into that controversy because I don't want to offend anyone. This is what I believe. I believe the directions to the book are in the directions to do the steps are in the big book. Now, in my early sobriety, when I start getting involved in the steps and I start getting better, I went through my evangelical stage. I had the fireman's hat on, I had the concordance, I had the highlighter, and I would have a 30-minute debate with you whether I was recovered or recovering. And the veins would be sticking in my neck, and I'd be yelling. People come up to me, damn, it was so good. Why are you so angry? When I get done quoting the book, I would get down and backhand you with it to make sure the message sunk in. The truth was I was using the big book as a weapon, not as a tool. So even though I believe strongly that the directions to do the steps are in the book, I no longer feel the need to enter into a debate with anyone. If you're interested, I could sit down and that's what I'm going to use, the book. If you're not interested, that's cool, and I move along. I mean, I'm embarrassed to tell you, I used to go to meetings and I would judge speakers. I mean, who the hell am I? I would judge, they got bad sobriety. 23 months sober, I beat another man with a baseball bat. I used to flippantly say, I forget what step I was working that day, but I realized that flippant remark takes away the viciousness of the attack. 23 months sober, making regular attendance at meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous, I beat another human being with a baseball bat. And I'm not proud of that at all. I just want to let you know how ugly I lived sober. And again, I touched lightly on my behavior with women, and because I'm not here to do a fist step. I didn't want my sponsor, but I needed to change those behaviors, So I try to practice the 10. Not try. I'm pretty good with a regular doing the 10 step, and as a result of that, not only has the obsession to drink has been lifted, The obsession to end my life has been lifted. The obsession for me to end anyone else's life has been, lifted. I'm just a regular guy from the neighborhood trying to get by the day to time. And I like to finish with this. And I know that I got lots of time left, but I'll finish early. I grew up in a neighborhood where it was a very blue-collar ethnic neighborhood. Very few people went on the formal education at the high school. And a sign of success was to get a union book. You joined one of the trades, My neighborhood, we had a lot of longshoremen, electricians, iron workers. And then if you didn't get arrested by a certain age, you could become a civil servant, cop, fireman, mailman, whatever the case may be. So let's use the trades as an example. So if you're going to become an iron worker, so you go in an apprentice program, you work 4 days a week, 1 day a week you go to school, and you go through the apprentice program through 4 years. At the end of 4 years, you become a journeyman. AA is the same way. You show up, we're an apprentice. We get ourselves a sponsor, a journeyman. I always say these controversial remarks for the end. If your sponsor hasn't done the steps, he or she has no business sponsoring you. Well, how do you find out they did the steps? I know, it's a trick. You ask them, and you're either going to hear two things, yes or no. The person says yes, that's your person, and he or she shares their experience, strength, and hope with you. You get the experience, and then you carry the message. It's been working that way since June 10th of 1935. Why do you need a dirt ball here from 7th and Wharton to come tell you to do it any differently? I love Alcoholics Anonymous. Alcoholics Anonymous is the corner I always went to hang on. I just didn't know where it was, So here I am. I'm 59 years old. My next birthday, I'm going to be 60. Unbelievable. Time flies. I got sober when I was 27. My drinking really was only 10 years. From 17, after I graduated from high school, I went down to the Wildwood for a week, for a senior week. Then I joined the Air Force. And then after 4 years in the Air Force, I came home and I got a job with the city. And I'm still with the city almost, almost 40-some, close to 39 years. But, so I drank for 10 years. I'm, sober, 31. I'll be 32 years in June. On my 50th birthday, never married, no kids. On my 50th birthday, I was in Arizona, the Arizona State Convention. And I had a very tough time. I think it's only natural on milestone birthdays or anniversaries that I just think it's natural to look back and see where we're at. But I was comparing myself to other people. So I wasn't doing an accurate appraisal. I was comparing myself to other people. I mean, I'm one of 8. 4 of my siblings are grandparents. Guys I went to school with, retired. They got grandchildren. And so, but however, the next day I was okay. September 6th was a tough day, but September 7th I was okay with it and just resigned myself. You know what? I'm not going to marry. And I was good with that. No married, no kids. I was okay with that. There's the old adage. You want to find out God has a sense of humor? Tell him your planes. And so, long story short, at the age of 51, I got married for the first time in my life. And I'm glad I waited as long as I did, because if I did it any sooner, I would have blown it. I would have ruined it. And it took me that long. Now, my wife is from Nebraska. I burned my bridges on the East Coast. Sorry. So, a long story. I love being married. I love my wife. And I just didn't have the capability of being in a healthy relationship in my previous sobriety. I've been sober ever since I came in, but even double digits, because I wasn't practicing these principles in all my affairs. So it was the best move I ever made. My wife was pregnant, and we lost the baby right before Christmas. And as difficult as that was, I've been sober long enough. I've seen men and women go through some terrible things through no fault of their own, and they get through it one day at a time. That's what Alcoholics Anonymous promises. Death, loved ones, even this particular crisis, I mean, you look what happened in 9/11, and what happens within a week, there's a meeting at Ground Zero. You look what happened at Katrina. Now, New Orleans is destroyed. And what happens? AA is stronger than ever. We have this crisis, and AA is thriving. Have to have this Zoom meeting. It's incredible. So if you are new, I don't wish you luck, because luck ain't got nothing to do with it. I don't want you to think sobriety is like a lottery and the wheel falls on you and today's your day to drink. It doesn't work that way. I hear people say, I did the steps and I still drink. You must have did something wrong. Unless I got the misprint edition, my book tells me if there's certain things I will do, I will stay sober one day at a time. I can't stay sober on yesterday's sobriety. Just like I couldn't stay drunk on yesterday's load. And I've been on some good loads, 2-3 days loads. Obviously, I had some other assistance. But, 2-3 day load, sooner or later you come to. You can't stay sober on yesterday's sobriety. I love Alcoholics Anonymous. So I was listening to the people that were sharing from around the world, where they were coming from. So I'll tell you how AA has really, how I got to enjoy AA. And so I was from, I always thought that I was Irish, 100% Irish, right? Both sets of my grandparents were immigrants. They came from Ireland. However, I was 40-some years. And the Irish, we love our secrets, right? I was in my early 40s and found out that my great-grandfather was actually from Scotland. And that was like, not only that, he was Protestant. So I'm thinking I'm Irish Catholic. My great-grandfather's Scotch Protestant. So my friend Lindsay in Glasgow invited me a number of years ago, and I did some research and found out that my great-grandfather, Francis Coyle, was born in Bells Hill, Scotland. So when Lindsay invited me to come to Glasgow, I said, listen, are you familiar with Bells Hill? He said, aye. He said, it's a one-horse town, and the horse died. But as a result of Alcoholics Anonymous, I went to Bells Hill, and I went to the town in which my great-grandfather was born. And the church was closed and looked for many years. The gravestones are weathered in the cemetery. You can't even make out the dates. And I was about to leave, and a caretaker pulled up. And I told him I'm from the States. My great-grandfather was born here, turn of the century. And he said, would you like to go in? He opened up the door, and I went in the church and walked the church in which my great-grandfather was a member as a kid. So my great-grandfather makes his way over to Northern Ireland, County Tyrone, where he meets a woman by the name of Mary Coyle. So how about that, right? We do that here. Well, never mind. I was going to say an inappropriate joke, but however, he met a woman, Mary Coyle. Coyle's like the Irish Smith, very common name. So they have 13 children. 7 of them come to the States. My grandfather's one of the States. The older ones make their way to Toronto, and the younger 4 make their way to Philadelphia. And my family's been here ever since. 15, 16 years ago, I get invited to go to the Ontario Regional Conference in Toronto. And the gentleman who invited me, I said, listen, I have some Coyles in Toronto. And, I've never met them. My grandfather always talked about them, Again, Alcoholics Anonymous. The guy who invited me to speak did a little research and found out that the Coyles actually were a prominent family in Toronto. They had a container company, big shipping company. And I flew up a day early, and I got to meet my family, again, through Alcoholics Anonymous. Now, one last funny story. In my home group at the time, the underground group, this is about 10 years ago, I'm sharing my story, right? And a girl comes up to me afterwards, and she said, did you say your name was Bobby Coyle? I said, yeah. She said, is your grandfather or your grandparents Bob and Libby Coyle? Now, they've been dead for years. I was shocked. I said, yes. She said, I'm your cousin. I met her because I used my full name in Alcoholics Anonymous. Thank God we never hooked up, but but by using my full name. And again, I was able to get caught up with other members of the family because unfortunately alcoholism ran through my family and caused a lot of problems. Being the sober one, I'm considered the black sheep. When in most normal families, the alcoholic's considered the black sheep. So I'd like to thank you all for allowing me to participate. It's been fantastic. For any of you who've joined late and are actually from New England, I know you got a couple of these. You may have seen this in the background and was wondering what that was. That is, yeah, it's correct. Lombardi Super Bowl when the Eagles won. So life is good. Thank you very much, and I look forward to seeing you on the road. Bye.